it's Kay. So today I wanted to make a video about how I chose the 3D printer I did for any of you out there looking to buy a 3D printer or just interested in learning more about 3D printers. So when I first started, I honestly didn't know anything about 3D printers other than that I really wanted one really bad. So if you're in that spot, that's totally okay. You can definitely learn. I just have a little bit of advice. If you're doing research, if you're looking at a printer or what have you, and you come across a term that you don't understand, stop what you're doing, just take a break from that and look up that term until you have a good understanding of it, and then come back. Because if you're muddling through and you're not really having a full understanding of what it is you're reading or looking at, then you're really not ever going to understand 100%. And that goes with everything, not just with 3D printers. So that's really what I recommend you do. It definitely helps me a lot in anything that I'm looking at. But back to the 3D printers. So when you're first starting to look at 3D printers, before you really do start looking at them, you need to identify what it is you want in a 3D printer. What are your 3D printer goals? What do you want in a 3D printer? So for me, it came down to three things: cost, ease of use, and longevity. So as you all know, I'm really cheap. So I went into this thinking I want to spend as little money as possible, which is how I always think, honestly. Honestly, like every day, I want to spend as little money as possible. And I, of course, had to reach a middle ground because I wanted a certain quality. So I had to reach a middle ground in the end, but that was one of my major factors. Ease of use was also a big one. As previously discussed, not a 3D printer expert going into this. I did not have the experience, so I wanted to make sure that this was a product that I would reasonably be able to use and also build, because kits are generally cheaper, so once again, cost going into it. But some of the kits that I was looking at, the cheaper ones, their instructions were hard to read or hard to understand, or there was no support. So if you put it together and it didn't work, you're kind of out of luck. Some of them, the parts either didn't fit together or they had to be like re-engineered, which worked out for some users, but I recognized that I really did not have the skill level to recognize and correct some of the problems that I was seeing. So I really wanted to steer clear of some of those. So ease of use was definitely a big one for me. But the third and probably largest factor for me was longevity. And when I say longevity, I don't just mean like the quality of the parts. I don't just mean that I want a printer that's going to last a long time, but I also wanted something that was going to be relevant to me for a long time. Some printers only print in like one or two materials, and that's fine, but I was worried that I was going to get bored with it. If my printer only prints in one material and at a low resolution and I'm restricted with how much I can do with it, then who's to say I won't get bored with it in a couple months, and a year down the road I might find myself buying and building a new printer, and then what was the point of this one to begin with? So I was more focused on trying to find a printer that I could invest in, that I would use for years and years to come. So once you have a good mental outline of what you want out of a printer, what your printer goals are, you want to start searching, start looking. And then once you have a few good printers that you're really looking at, that you think you really like, read reviews, read so many reviews, watch a lot of videos, and this goes double for if you're doing a kit, because if you're doing a kit or you're building your printer, you need to be able to build it and make sure you're able to build it, and also that you're able to use it and that it works good. So it goes double for you guys. But just so many reviews. Do not impulse buy a 3D printer. Don't do it. Take your time. And if your 3D printer does multiple materials, make sure you research all of them. Some printers, especially in the more exotic materials, kind of struggle with the more exotic materials. So I would just, take a look, just make sure everything's running smoothly, and make sure you get to see pictures of the final products as well. You definitely want to make sure that you're getting the quality that you want from that exact printer. So just a few things to keep in mind there. Take your time with the research. And while you're doing the research, just a few terms to keep in mind, just general terms. Your print volume, that's the space, the 3D space that your printer can move and print in. So I really recommend get a ruler out. Actually visualize the space. This is really important. Your printer can't print anything larger than this space, and you can absolutely get creative and align something weird or on its side or upside down. That's totally fine, and I've even seen where people print parts that screw together or glue them together after, but ultimately if you're printing really large parts, you're going to need a really large print volume in your printer. And then another one to really look out for is minimum layer height. So that's essentially the resolution for the printer, and that's going to be in microns, typically in microns. And so a good way to think about that is that's each individual layer of plastic that it runs around. That's what that is. So the lower the number is better, generally speaking, as far as, the final product. But again, you really have to know your application for this. If you're just a hobbyist, if you just want a printer to play around with, you might not care as much about minimum layer height. But if you're a small business, you might really want a nice low number there. So you really have to know what you need your printer for this. Next up, print speed. Pretty self-explanatory. You really want to watch some videos for this. It's kind of hard to visualize when you see that number on a screen. Prints in general take quite a few hours, and so a lot of users are very, very good about posting hey, I did this print at this layer height and it took this long. So I definitely recommend looking up some videos. Some user videos are really good about that, and that'll help you get an idea of how quick the printer actually is. Once again, that's something that I wasn't really worried about, but if you want to crank it, excuse me, if you want to crank out prints all the time, that might be something you really want to check out. Materials, also very important. You have to know really what you want to print in. So PLA and ABS are the most important. ABS you have to have a heated printed bed for. Otherwise, your prints are probably going to warp as the plastic cools. PLA doesn't really have that requirement. And then you have some of your more exotic materials, which once again, I would just make sure that the printer prints well in those materials, because I know some printers will do them, but will do them with difficulty and such. So just again, watch some videos, do your research, read reviews, but do it. And then software. So most printers nowadays don't have issues with this, but when I was looking at some of the cheaper printers, some of them did. Some of them are very specific about the software that they use. You have to use this program and you have to use this file type. And that really kind of made it difficult for me, especially as a newbie. So I would just take some time, make sure that you can use the software that printer requires, or, use that your computer can use that software. Just take some time, a couple minutes, make sure it works before you buy the printer, build the printer, and then find out you can't use it. So for me, after all my research, it really came down to two printers. I, at that point, had realized I was probably going to be spending a little bit more than I originally set out to. I was in about the $500 to $600 US range, and that was pretty much as high as I really wanted to go. Excuse me. And that's when I stumbled upon the Vertex by Velleman, and it was absolute love at first sight with that thing. It had great quality for the price. I was absolutely amazed. Oh my gosh, I wanted to buy that printer the first time I saw it, but like I said, don't impulse buy a 3D printer. Don't do it. So I was like, okay, well, I need to find other 3D printers in this price point and to compare them. So that's when I saw the Kossel XL by Build a 3D Printer. And initially I didn't even want to do research on it. I was so biased. I was like, oh, all right, fine. So as I was doing some research on the Kossel, I realized that the Kossel actually could do the same quality as the Vertex and in multiple materials, like really exotic materials that I hadn't even seen in a 3D printer for consumer use before. So I was really wowed by that. So in good faith, because I was so sold on the Vertex, I reached out to Velleman and I said, hey, are we going to be able to use these multiple materials soon? Is there any way that I could potentially buy a different print head or, do something else? Because this isn't a kit, so could I potentially build it differently? Or is this something you're looking at doing in the future? And the responses I got really dampened my spirits a little bit. They were very short, no, this will never happen. Never, no. And so I was like, wow. Alternatively, build a 3D printer. Any response that I got from them, because I reached out to them for a few times for a few questions here and there, they were more than happy to help me, and they were just very kind about it. So, honestly, that kind of started to shift the tides, I guess, a little bit for me. But all in all, it came down to a few things. The Vertex did have 2 extruders, which some people probably, that's a really big thing. But for me and my needs, I really wasn't even going to get the second extruder. It's just not something that I saw any worth in. So it just really wasn't something for me. At the time, and this may have changed, but at the time, shipping was going to be an absolute nightmare with Velleman. They wanted me to reach out to multiple nearby retailers, which I did, but there weren't any in my state at all. So I had to reach out to the next nearby state, to small businesses. Some of them didn't even know what I was talking about. I never got an actual price estimate from any of them. And then I had to try and get shipping estimates from them, from the company, and I don't even know what it actually would cost. I never found that out. So just all in all, it was a very impressive quality, but all in all, it was just too difficult. Alternatively, the Kossel, I saw the video tutorials that they have. The actual company Build a 3D Printer made video tutorials on how to actually assemble the printer, which for an absolute newbie like me was amazing. I mean, everyone else had these instructions, but looking back, I probably would have had a much more difficult time putting something together without being able to actually see it done. So I'm so thankful for that. And then as far as the longevity standpoint, this absolutely blew that out of the water. I mean, the multiple materials, the quality, I mean, it was much more than I expected going in. It was much more than I expected to get for the money. So it's definitely what I wanted to get. But then also the parts and everything were quality parts. It was, all in all, the company was easy to deal with. I got the support I wanted, and also they were very easy to ship. And all in all, it was what I wanted. So so that's how I chose. But I thank you guys so much for watching, and let me know in the comments, what do you guys look for in a 3D printer? I want to know.